Good evening and welcome to my channel. And today I'm going to be getting into all the horror films that I watched in 2024 and going to do a tier list for them. Before I go any further, just say that those wondering why Nosferatu is not on here, I only watched that yesterday. You can check that review out on my TikTok and my YouTube channel, both called Quest for Horror. So I'll be treating that as a 2025 release. If there's any horror films on here that you see that aren't on here, it's simply because I just haven't watched them or I wasn't interested in them. So we're going to go with the list I've got here. They're in no particular order. So let's get into this. So starting off with one of the year's worst, Night Swim. Oh dear, oh dear. So I watched this on streaming at home. I heard bad things about this, and it's very with the Blumhouse. You never know what you're going to get, but this was an absolute stinker. Um, I hated the premise. There was terrible CGI. The acting was absolutely atrocious. It was just an out and out disaster of a film for me, and that is going into the lame horror category. It was just absolutely awful. It really was. And let's go on to Mr. Crockett, which was a Hulu original. Now, I really liked a lot of aspects about this film, but there's a lot of stuff that I didn't like. The opening sequence I thought was very, very good. There's some really good use of practical effects in this film, and I love the premise. So basically, you've got Mr. Crockett, who basically comes out the TV and he tries to protect children that have like parents that basically are mean to them or whatever. So it's kind of like Freddy Krueger meets Mr. Rogers. And I really liked it. It was a really cool idea for a horror villain. Unfortunately, despite a really good performance by the actor that plays Mr. Crockett and some great practical effects, the story itself, and especially the dialogue, were absolute dog shit. I really didn't like it at all. But because it had some good ideas in here, we're going to put that in tame horror. As I say, I think there was some good stuff there, but it just didn't really land for me personally. Next up, a film that is absolutely fantastic, and that is Strange Darling. So I heard a lot of the early sort of buzz about this. It wasn't a film I got to check out in the cinema. I wasn't showing in my local cinema, but I caught this as soon as it was out on streaming, and it is absolutely fantastic. This is a film that you need to go into blind, because you'll get the best experience with this. You really, really will. Um, as I say, it's nothing new in terms of a story, but the way it's told is absolutely brilliant, and there's some real good twists and turns in there. Fantastic acting, and yeah, if you want a real good like horror thriller, you can't go wrong with this. That for me is going to go into the A tier. Pretty horrific. Okay, so next we have the HBO, the sort of like the remake, if you will, of Salem's Lot. Now, I've never read the Salem's Lot novel by Stephen King. It is on my list that I do want to read. I've never seen the original Toby Hooper film, which I know a lot of people really, really like, and I'm definitely want to check that out at some point. Um, so I didn't have any sort of knowledge about the actual story. I know obviously it was vampires in a small town, but that's all I knew. So there was no previous source material or the previous film that sort of marred my experience going in. And it was decent. I mean, I found it fun. It's definitely nothing special. It's definitely nothing to write home about, but had a good time with it. And I think if you're a fan of vampire films, I think you'll have a good time with it. But just, I think if you're probably someone that's expecting the level of Stephen King's novel, because I've heard that's absolutely fantastic, and even like so the Toby Hooper original film, I would say just go in with an open mind. But I had a good time with it. But that to me is going to go into the B tier horror mid. Okay, so next up we have a film that really intrigued me when I saw it advertised. It was going to Shudder, Daddy's Head. So this is a low budget indie film where basically there's a situation with a young boy and his stepmother. Events happen, and then the young boy starts seeing his father's head, but it's this like, is it in his head or is it actually this creature he's seeing? It was really creepy and really unnerving. There's some really good, solid set pieces in it and some solid scares. But ultimately, the sort of third act didn't really land for me. But considering it's an indie film, I think it was. I think it's really well done. And I say I did have a good time. It's probably a film I actually want to revisit at some point. But I did come away from it pretty happy. But I would say for that, that's going to go in the B tier. If you want something really sort of creepy and unnerving, I definitely recommend you check it out. It's streaming on Shudder. Okay, so I think everyone that sort of follows me on YouTube or TikTok knows what's happening with this one. Terrifier 3. Now, I have to be honest, when I first watched it, I didn't know what to think of it. I enjoyed it, but I found the pacing I thought was too quick. I really liked Terrifier 2. Terrifier 2 is still my favourite. I thought that was paced brilliantly. I thought the pacing on this Terrifier 3 on the first watch, a bit too fast. Kills were great, but I thought art was a bit too silly. But on repeated watches, and I've just recently picked up the 4K Blu-ray, I absolutely love it. I probably watched this film about 8 to 10 times already since October. I absolutely love it. I love Art the Clown, the new modern horror icon. I think David Howard Thornton is absolutely fantastic. I love Damien Leone, and Lauren Rivera is a great new final girl. So for me, that is an absolute horror hit. That is S tier for me easily. Okay, so next we have a remake of a very bleak, brutal Danish film, which is called Speak No Evil. So this is also the same name, Speak No Evil. This was a Blumhouse film. Now, when I heard the Blumhouse were doing this, I thought, oh no, not a remake. We all know what happens with majority of remakes. And also, going back to like Night Swim, which is a Blumhouse film, you never know what you're going to get. So James McAvoy is in this, who plays our titular villain, and they've changed. They kept a lot the same from the original Speak No Evil film, but they changed the last act. The last act in this film is nowhere near as bleak. The original Speak No Evil is so dark, and I watched it again a couple of months ago, and that still has the power to shock. I remember when I first watched the original Danish version, I couldn't stop thinking about it for days. One of the most shockingly brutal films, darkest films I've ever seen. But I must say, I actually did enjoy the Speak No Evil remake. I thought I was going to hate it, but I kind of liked the direction that they went in, even though it wasn't as effective as me as the original. So there's some great acting, and the way they changed up the final act, I really enjoyed that. So for me, that's going to go into the B tier, the horror mid. Okay, so next we have is a film I've only watched recently, actually over Christmas. So Heretic, starring Hugh Grant. So I heard a lot of really good buzz out of this. I think this premiered. I could be wrong. I think it was Fantastic Fest earlier last year, and this is a religious horror. We've had a few religious horrors come out this or last year. Sorry, a couple of more of them are on this list. Out of the three of them, this was my favorite, I must say. Now, I'm not religious in any way. I'll admit I am a complete atheist. But I think it doesn't matter what faith you are, this film challenges faith and challenges your belief system. And the way this film plays out with Hugh Grant and these two Mormon missionaries that come to visit him, I think it's expertly done. I think for a lot of people, it may be a bit too slow. It is kind of a slow burn type of film. It is an A24 film, but I thought it was absolutely brilliant. So well done. I think Hugh Grant as a villain, he was super creepy. I love to see him do more of these kinds of roles. So for me, that was really solid, and that's going into the A tier. Okay, so next we have Stop Motions. This is a film that came out earlier on last year, and again, there's another indie film. There was a lot of buzz for this, and I was really excited to check this out. So this is basically a story about a woman that has an estranged sort of relationship with her mother, and she does all this stop motion claymation type of stuff. It's really creepy looking like dolls and figurines. So if any of you that know the band Tool, if you know what I'm talking about, their videos in the 90s, they did some really creepy stop motion videos, and that really reminded me of that. Um, it's again another film which don't watch a trailer. Going Blind. It's super, super creepy and unsettling. There's some really nasty type of body horror in this and psychological torment, and I really enjoyed it. Um, the ending I wasn't so keen on, but I think it was really, really solid. And if you want something different, I would definitely recommend checking this out. But for me, that's going to go into the B tier. Okay, so next up we have another indie film. This was a Spanish film, The Coffee Table. Now, I heard a lot of early buzz about this, people saying it was absolutely shocking and not for the faint of heart. So I watched this on streaming, and seriously, this is the only film last year that quite upset me. And I admit I had tears while watching this. I'm not going to spoil anything. Again, this is one of these films. Do not read anything. Do not watch a trailer if you want to see it. But if you like dark, disturbing films, I would implore you to check this out. It may be a bit too much for some, the subject matter in this, but I thought it was absolutely brilliant, brilliantly done, brilliantly acted, and I can't just wait to see what this director does in the future. And for me, that is going into the A tier. That was absolutely horrific film. Okay, so next we have a film, Milk and Cereal. So this is directed by two YouTubers, and this is actually free to watch on YouTube. They didn't put it on any sort of streaming platform or anything like that. And it's a short film. I think it's just maybe an hour or just less than an hour long. And it is one of the creepiest films I watched last year. It's absolutely brilliant. I can't actually remember. I should have looked this up. Um, the guy's YouTube channel that made this film, but it is really, really unsettling, and there's some really good camera work in this. The stuff they do in it, um, there's some like pranks that are set up, and it just goes batshit crazy. I really enjoyed this, and as I say, it's free to watch on YouTube, and I would strongly recommend you check this out. And that for me is going in the S tier. Pretty horrific. Okay, it's a really good year for horror last year. It really was fantastic. Another film, this is a Shudder original, another indie film. So again, this film Oddity is from the director of Caveat, which was a creepy ass film I watched a few years ago. Really freaked me out. And the director's now come out with this film Oddity, which is one of the most unique films I watched last year. The premise of the film, the execution of the film, the scares in the film, and there are several scares in this film that really, really got me. A very unsettling atmosphere, and I would definitely recommend you check this out. Again, go into this film blind. Don't read anything. Don't watch a trailer because I didn't, and I'm really glad that I did. Absolutely solid. Watch this film. I've actually watched this film twice, and I've enjoyed it. I enjoyed it even more the second time. So I definitely recommend you check this out. And that's going into the S tier. Okay, so next, Maxine. I was so looking forward to this film. I loved X. I thought that was an amazing film. And then we found out, obviously, there was going to be a prequel, Pearl. Pearl was a different Pearl was more like a character study, whereas X was more like a dirty grindhouse slasher, um, in the vein of sort of like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And Maxine was being billed as this like giallo type murder mystery, and I was really excited. The trailer got me really, really pumped, and I'm a huge fan of Mia Goth. I watched the film a couple of times. I watched it at the cinema and I watched it again at home, and I was a little disappointed. I think there's a lot in this film that I really liked. Mia Goth, as always, is absolutely fantastic. I loved Kevin Bacon's character in this. Giancarlo Esposito as well. He had a really good role in this, but it was very disjointed. It's finally felt to me he didn't really know what type of film it wanted to be, and the reveal of who was targeting Maxine, I thought was very very obvious when you've seen the end of X. So there was no really sort of surprise there for me. So that knocked it down a few points for me. But however, having said that, I still had a really good time with this film, and I think overall, uh, as a trilogy, Pearl, X, and Maxine, I think it's one of the best trilogies we've had in horror for a long time. So for me, that's going to go in the B tier. B tier. Sorry, excuse me. B tier horror mid. Next up, wow, Alien Romulus. I watched this at the cinema. I watched this about 2 or 3 times at home, and I bought the 4K Blu-ray recently. I absolutely fucking love this film. I know there's going to be people out there with different opinions, and that's absolutely fine. I mean, I love Fede Alvarez as a director. His 2013 Evil Dead remake. Also, Don't Breathe, I thought was absolutely incredible. And I knew he was going to do an amazing job of this, but he blew my expectations out of the water. He made this a true alien horror film. There's some really intense, nasty sequences in this. The final act is probably my favorite of the year. One of the best creature designs I've seen for a long time, which is pure nightmare fuel. And for me, this is an absolute must, an absolute future classic. And that is going in the S tier for me, horror hit. Okay, so next up we have one of the other religious horror films that released last year. So Immaculate, starring Sydney Sweeney. Um, there were certain aspects of this film that I really enjoyed. The reveal as to what's going on, I thought was absolutely ridiculous. Personally, um, it was kind of like it's going to sound strange to people that not watch this when I say it's a religious horror film, but it reminded me of Jurassic Park, and you know what I mean when you see the reveal in this film. But I mean, Sydney Sweeney's acting in this is absolutely top notch. She's incredible, especially the final few moments, which had a lot of people's jaw on the floor. I thought it was a really good ending, but it's something I've seen done better in a much nastier film before. But overall, I mean, I had a good time with it. But it wasn't the best for me. Or a lot of people have really praised this film. It just didn't hit those heights for me. So that's going to go into the B tier horror mid. Okay, so next up we have Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2. Now, obviously, the original Blood and Honey was absolutely trashed, and for good reason. It was absolutely terrible. The costume design, the execution, the acting, the kills, everything about it was just lame. But when they announced Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey 2, I was really excited. When they released the trailer, I thought, wow, they put a lot more, Jagged Edge Productions have put a lot more money into this. The the characters Pooh, Winnie, Winnie Pooh, Piglet, Owl, Tigger look really good. The acting looked better. Um, it looked like the budget on just on everything, cinematography, everything. And I've watched it, and I actually really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what Jagged Edge Productions do next. We've got in a few weeks, couple of weeks time, Peter Pan Neverland, and that looks dark as fuck. We've got Pinocchio Unstrung, that's also coming out, and Bambi the Reckoning. I'm really excited to see what they're going to do with their Pooniverse. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think there was things about this film. I thought the kills in this film were brutal. There were certain aspects, like one of the characters I was really looking forward to seeing was Tigger, but you only really got small parts in the film. I really want to see more of him, but as a whole, it was a huge step up from the original, and a really good time with it. So that for me is going in the horror midsection, the B tier. Okay, so next up, Smile 2. I love this film. I watched this at the cinema day one. I've seen it a couple times at home since, and I love it. I love the original Smile, but I think Parker Finn with this sequel, outdone himself in every way. It's bigger, it's nastier, it's meaner, it's darker, it's just vicious. And Naomi Scott's performance in this is one of the best performances of 2024, not just in horror, but in anything I watched last year. I think she was absolutely fantastic. I think the way the film ebbs and flows, it generally creeped me out. There's some really fantastic set pieces that really scared the shit out of me. Some really good invented jump scares, and I really like the finale, even though I knew where it was going. And I'm really excited to see what Parker Finn does next. And I really hope we do get a Smile 3. But that for me is S tier, and that is going in the horror hit. Next up, we had a film that I was really looking forward to seeing last year. When I heard the initial buzz and reactions and the trailer, I was really intrigued with Cuckoo. So I didn't get to see Cuckoo at the cinema. I had a very limited run in my local cinema, so I watched it on streaming a couple of months ago, and I really didn't like this film. It was very weird. I did watch it again, and I just still didn't like it. I understood the premise, I understood what was going on, but it just didn't gel for me. It was so wacky, and it was so out there. But Hunter Schafer's performance was very, very good, and also Daniel Stevens, which I think is he's so good in horror. He really, really is. But for me, this film just didn't work. There was no scares that really affected me in there. Nothing that really stood out apart from like the two sort of leads. So for me, that's going in the C tier, tame horror. One of my favorite horror movie IPs of the last few years is A Quiet Place Day One. And also last year, we got the Quiet Place game, which I really, really enjoyed. And I was really looking forward to seeing what they're going to do with the Quiet Place Day One. And I really love this film. It's different compared to the pace of the original two. It still had that, those really emotional beats, especially with Lupita Nyong'o's character. I think she did an amazing job in this film, and this film really pulls at the heartstrings. Why you have this backdrop of this day one of like monsters invading Earth, these creatures that hunt by sound. And I really, really enjoyed it. I watched it again since, and I still had a really, really good time. I think if you're a fan of the Quiet Place franchise, you're really going to like this. And for me, that is going in the A tier. Okay, so next up, another Shudder horror. And when I saw the trailer for this, I was like, wow, I know this is going to freak me the fuck out. Because Infested is a spider horror film. We had another spider horror film last year, Sting, which I didn't bother watching. It looked a bit too silly for me. But I watched Infested, and it genuinely freaked me out. I hate spiders. I have a rash. I am a huge fear of spiders, and this film exacerbated that no end. I thought it was brilliantly acted. I thought the spiders looked great. There was a lot that used a lot of real spiders in here. Obviously, there's a lot of CGI type spiders, but I think they look really, really good. And the director of this film, I can't remember the director's name off the top of my head, but he is directing the new Evil Dead film called Evil Dead Burn, which I believe is going to be out either 2026 or 2027. I am really excited to see what this director does with the Evil Dead franchise, because this film was absolutely brutal. And even though I hate spiders, I love this film because it genuinely unsettled me. It's something that I've got a genuine fear of. And for me, that is going in the A tier. Next up was one of the earliest, probably I think maybe one of the first. I probably watched the first horror film I watched in 24, which was Late Night with the Devil. I watched at the cinema, starring um, David Dasmalchian, and I'm really excited to see David Dasmalchian in a leading role because he's such a great actor. But you see him in a lot of these like smaller type roles, and I've always wanted to see him lead a film, and he does a phenomenal job in this. So this is basically set up as a 1970s talk show where David Dasmalchian is the talk show host, and due to flaming figures, he's trying to get views, and he has a girl on there that's possessed, and shit just goes crazy. And I really enjoyed it. I know there's a lot of mixed opinions about this film, but I had a great time with it, and I'm planning to watch it again soon. And for me, this also goes into the A tier. I thought it was an absolutely solid film and a really good premise. Next film, for The Substance. I knew very little about this about a month prior to release, and I saw the trailer a couple of films I watched at the cinema, and I was hooked. Originally, I was going to go and see this at Fright Fest in London, but unfortunately, I couldn't get a ticket. The ticket for showing had run out, so I saw this day one when it was at my local cinema, and holy shit, I am in love with this film. I thought Demi Moore in this film was absolutely incredible. This film directed by Coralie Farge, who did Revenge, which is a brutal revenge thriller on Shudder. Please check that out if you've not seen it. Margaret Qualley was also great in this. Dennis Quaid chewing up scenery and being a disgusting, despicable person. But this is some of the best body horror I have ever seen. And this is one film where you see one thing, you think, oh, they can't top this bit, this batshit crazy scene. And they top it with another one and something else and something else and something else. And the practical effects in this film are out of this fucking world. I had an amazing time with this film, and this is one of the best horror films I have ever seen. And to me, that is easy S tier. Next film. Now, this is going to be a controversial for some people because I know lots of people really like this film, but I know lots of people that didn't like this film. Longlegs. I was really on board watching this film. The trailers and the marketing for this film had me super, super hyped. And but ultimately, after watching the film, I thought the film was hilarious. I thought Nicolas Cage's performance as Longlegs was ridiculous and just funny. I didn't find him creepy at all. Um, and it just didn't do it for me. People comparing it to Silence of the Lambs, it's nothing like Silence of the Lambs. It just didn't do it. I didn't like the supernatural aspects of this film as well. I really, really didn't like that at all. It just one of the. I just think the marketing of this film, personally, it was it was better than the actual film itself. Unfortunately, I mean Mika Monroe. I thought she did a great job on the film. Her acting was great, but just as a whole, the film it just didn't do it for me. There was nothing really horrific in this, and I really didn't like the ending either. I just thought it was stupid. I really, really did. This is going to be probably a shock to some, but for me, this is Lane Horror Spike, a good central lead performance. I hated everything else about the film. I really did. Really, my biggest disappointment, I'd say, of 2024. Next, we have In a Violent Nature. So this is a very experimental slasher film in the style of like a Friday the 13th with a masked killer, but except you're always following the killer, like I was most of the time like a third person perspective, like a video game, so like Resident Evil or something like that. And I really liked it. It was a very tranquil experience, actually, like hearing all like what's going on in the woods, the birds through the trees, the rustle of the killer walking over leaves and stuff like that. It has one of the best slasher kills of all time and one of the best kills last year. If you watched it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen this film, for that kill alone, it is worth it. However, saying that, the rest of the film is pretty lame. It's quite boring. It's very slow burn, and not really a lot happens apart from that really standout kill. The last 15 minutes of this film, I don't know what the fuck the director was thinking, but it is absolute BS. But it looks like we are going to be getting a sequel at some point. So I definitely will check out a sequel to see what happens with that. But for me, despite an incredible kill, and I do like the killer we have in this, ultimately it just wasn't enough. And for me, that is in the C tier. Next up, we have The Strangers Chapter One. So we're getting Chapter Two hopefully at some point this year. I'm a really big fan of the original The Strangers. I also like Strangers Pray at Night. I think that's a great sequel. A lot of people don't really like that, but I really enjoy it. I was intrigued to see what they're going to do with this. I mean, this is pretty much a carbon copy of the original, but just not as good. But I do love the maskers. I love the masks of these killers in this. I've always found them really super unsettling. But unfortunately, it's just a carbon copy. Nothing else was really done. I think they're going maybe a little bit more of a religious angle in this, which I hope is be explored in on the next film. I definitely will be checking out the other. There's chapter two and chapter three, so I'll definitely be checking both them out. But for me, this didn't really deliver, and that for me goes in the C tier. Okay, so next up we have Azrael, starring Samantha Weaving, who I absolutely love. I mean, Samantha Weaving, Samara Weaving. I do beg your pardon. Obviously, we've had her in Ready or Not. We're getting a sequel to Ready or Not. I don't know if it's going to be out this year or the following year, but I'm really excited for that. Obviously, she had a cameo at the beginning of Scream 6, which I absolutely loved. And this film was brilliant. It's a really short film, maybe I think it's less than an hour and a half. There's no dialogue. It's just straight to the point, super brutal, and Samara Weaving gives it her all in this role, and I really, really enjoyed it. Nothing, nothing you haven't seen before, but it was also really enjoyable. And it's definitely a film I think, because of how short it is, it's definitely you can do for like a watch in future because it's not one of these films that's 2 or 2+ hours long, but I really enjoyed it for what it was, and I thought it was solid. So that's going in the B tier for me. Okay, so next up, we have the third of the one of the religious horror films we had this year, and I thought the first Omen was really solid. Again, this is like a prequel. I thought, oh, prequel. What are we going to get? What are we going to get from this? But this had some absolutely shocking imagery. One scene in between, which made me shout out loud, "Holy fucking shit!" I was like, "Wow! I did not expect to see that in a mainstream film." And yeah, I mean, Nell Tiger Free, who was in the Servant series on Apple, which I really loved the performance in that. I think she's absolutely fantastic in this. I think the Servant as a really, really good prequel to the original Omen. I really enjoyed this a lot more than what I thought I would. I thought it was absolutely solid. So if you're someone that's on the fence about it, I would definitely recommend you check this out. And for me, that is going into the A tier. And last up, but not least, we have Abigail. I was really looking forward to this film last year, and this film for me did not disappoint whatsoever. A perfect balance of comedy and horror. The main performance, I forget the actress's name that plays Abigail, but she was absolutely brilliant. Really, at times unnerving, vicious, but also really, really funny. There's a great cast in this film, absolutely brilliant. Some great action, some really strong leads, and yeah, if you haven't checked out Abigail, I definitely recommend you check it out. For me, that's also going into the A tier. Perfect. So there you go, guys. So there's all the horror films that I watched in 2024, my personal ranking. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you agree with my ranking? Do you not? Maybe give me some of your thoughts of the films that you watched this year, last year, what you thought, and hopefully if there's some films on here that you've not seen, I hope this list implores you to go and check them out. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.